Amberley Village officials are committed to providing information to our residents and keeping them informed. Today, Mayor Tom Muething takes an in-depth look at the village funds. Residents will find out where to go online to access financial data, hear the latest on financial trends, and know more about the monthly review process conducted by the Finance Committee. They will also find out how finances continue to be a focal point for the Village Council. Let's join Mayor Muething as he reviews Amberley Village finances.
Today, as I said, we're going to talk about finance and specifically on the cost side. Now, one thing we've done as a administration and council is try to make financial information available to our residents. And you can now go on our website, and there's on our website, there's a tab called Open Village Finance. If you go onto that, you get access to our village reports. You can even get access to if you wanted to research how much Amberley Village paid our solicitor or something like that, you can do that. And it's very specific. It's actually very easy to use, so you can just go on that tab. When you go on that tab, it gives you an ability to look at reports. And you can look at reports on our general fund or any other fund. In village finances, you have multiple funds, and that is something that can be a little challenging when you look at our village finances. We have 24 different funds in total, but the big funds are general fund, where most of our expenses are paid out of. We have the police levy fund, which the police levy collects all the revenues that come in from the amounts that all our residents pay in real estate taxes, and the revenues come into that fund, and a substantial portion of the police costs are paid out of that fund. We have the street fund, where again we pay to repave our streets and do street maintenance. We have our capital fund, where we do things like buy police cruisers or buy our dump trucks and things like that. And then we have the stormwater utility fund, where again our residents pay into the stormwater utility through our water bills, and then that money is available to help maintain our stormwater service. So one thing that when you look at these individual funds, and that's what I'm going to try to focus on today, is to try to help people understand how you do an analysis when you click on these funds. We, as the Finance Committee of the village, meet on a monthly basis, and we do pretty much this. The bulk of our time is focused on the general fund in our meetings, and you're welcome to come at any point. These meetings are posted. But we sit and we analyze and try to understand trends in our finances and things like that. So we will now look at specifically a report that we reviewed at our Finance Committee, and I will try to help identify the type of analysis that you have to do. So this report shows total expenditures from the years 2013 through 2017. This is total expenditures across all of our funds. And the reason the Finance Committee wanted to do this is we wanted to try to really understand trends in our costs, but we had to do certain adjustments to those total expenditures. And I'll try to explain what those adjustments were. The first adjustment you see in this slide is transfers out. And what this is in a lot of these funds, like the street fund, like the capital fund, they do not get sufficient revenues into those funds to pay for all the expenses that we do for our street maintenance and our capital fund. So what we will do is transfer out of our general fund into those funds. Unfortunately, when the way government accounting works, when you transfer out, that is an expense of one fund and a revenue of the other. And so if you think of your personal checking account and savings account, when you say make a transfer out of your savings account into your checking account, under this type of accounting, that would show up as an expenditure and a revenue. So what we want to do, and that's why we've backed these out, is we take the transfers out of our expenses because it's not really an expense of the village. It's only an expense of the village when we actually pay to have our streets paved, or when we pay to buy a truck or something like that. And those are already captured in our expenses. The next thing we pull out is our deposits that are refunded. The major deposit that is refunded is income taxes. So a resident will pay in income taxes on an estimated basis when they file the return. They may have paid too much. So again, the way government accounting works, that shows up as an expense. And I am an accountant. Traditionally, I would have thought of that as just reducing the revenues that we get from tax receipts, but you cannot do that in government accounting. So we back that out to understand our trends. The next thing we backed out was the federal grants that we have received. Again, this is money that comes in from different grants, and then we pay it out. Again, it is not really a revenue or an expense for the village. The next adjustment we made was our Mayor's Court Agency. And here's again, the Mayor's Court Agency Fund is a separate fund. We take in funds for our Mayor's Court and into the agency fund, and then we pay those funds out to different things. The bulk of the money goes into our general fund, but we also have to expend money to the state treasurer, to the county treasurer, and to others. So again, it is not truly an expense. It is just a transfer between funds, so we back it out. The next big one is what you see on the slide is the JEDZ. This is the JED that we had formed with Sycamore Township a few years ago, and we take in tax revenues on behalf of Sycamore Township, and Amberley Village gets 10% of the money and gets to keep that. But when we take the money in, that counts as revenues, but then when we pay it out to Sycamore Township and pay it out to our general fund, it counts as an expense. Again, it is not really an expense, it is a transfer between funds, so we back it out. So that brings us to the first point where we think we can really start to understand trends in our expenses. And what you can see is that the expenses from 2013 to 2017 did increase pretty substantially from 5.7 million up to 7.2 million. So, that was a first step in understanding. But then what we wanted to do was back out what we call more one-time expenditures, so more capital type things, more street programs, things that are not pretty constant from a year to year, that very much vary a great deal. And we do a separate analysis. What we're trying to do in this first step is to really try to get to recurring expenses and understand the trend in those expenses. So we've backed out general fund capital. These are things bought out of the general fund for capital. We next back out capital project capital. So these are things definitely like a dump truck or a police cruiser or something like that. These can vary a great deal year to year depending on what goes on in that year. As you can see, in 2013 we only spent $42,000, but in 2016 we spent $403,000. And the reason for that is we have very lumpy things that we might have to spend. I think in 2016 we did have to buy a couple of dump trucks and some other police cruisers, and so that was a very high expenditure year. So we want to back that out to really understand our trends. The next one is the streets program, and again, this can vary very significantly year to year. You can see in 2016 we only spent a little under $60,000, but in 2017 we spent over $705,000. And the reason for that is we really try to manage our street program to a relatively even level, but you really can't do that because some of our paving programs is going to be more significant. But we want to try to manage it as even as possible to make it more manageable for our staff as we have multiple contractors, and it just makes it easier to manage. But you can't always do it perfectly. And then similar on the stormwater front, we wanted to take those expenditures out to really understand the trend. So this now brings us back to a trend that we can really understand. So what you see here is that when we got down to this point, our expenses in 2013 were $4.8 million, and grew relatively steadily. In 2015 and 2016, they were very flat, and then in 2017, they grew again. So some of the things that can cause a little bit lumpy movement is we pay our staff every 2 weeks. Because of that, we have some years that we have additional payroll in a year, and that additional payroll, because our staffing expenses is our largest expense, can cause expenses to come out of line in individual years. But the average across these 5 years, as far as gross, was 4.6%, which we were as a finance committee really hoping that this would be more like 3% or something like that. So we were not real happy with the 4.6%, but it is relatively in line with what our expectations were. But it is something that, again, stressed to us that we always have to watch our expenses at every moment. And to the credit of our village staff, they realize that and are trying to look at ways of saving cost at every moment. The next thing we wanted to do, because staffing and wages and benefits is our most significant cost, was look at that individually. And as you can see, that's the next item we look at, and that has grown from $3.4 million in 2013 up to a little under $4 million in 2017. And again, in individual years, it grew a little bit more, but the average across the 5 years was 4.26%. What has caused that? We did find ourselves in 2013 having cut our staffing level down to a level that we, especially over the last 2 years, found that we'd cut it a little too much. So we have hired an additional police officer, we hired an additional dispatcher, and we've had overtime at different points. And then, during the real lean times, pre-2013, we had frozen wages of our staff for a number of years, and we've really caught up over the last 5 years. So, we as a council are pretty happy with where we've gotten our staffing and our wages now and caught up on that. And on the maintenance side, again, I think we're pretty happy that we now have caught up from the years that we really had to reduce expenses to a level that was not really sustainable. So after we as council reviewed this with staff, as I said, we concluded that we have additional work to do, but we're on the right trend, and that our costs are really under control, but that we still have to find ways of continuing to reduce costs so that we are managing our costs down to a level of a growth not to exceed 3 or 3.5% on an annual basis is something that I think we can live with. But we want to make sure that in no year does our costs grow, greater than 5%, unless we have a real good understanding of why that is, and that reason is something that is not reoccurring. So, as I said, today we focused on the cost side. In a future video, I'll focus on the revenue side, which is equally something that's very important, and council and staff have been focused on trying to find ways to grow our revenues and control expenses, which is ultimately our answer, is that we will have a strong financial situation if we can control expenses and grow our revenues at a percentage greater than what our costs are going up.
We hope you have found this video, along with our others, to be useful and helpful. This information and knowledge goes a long way towards understanding how your local government operates and works.